Dignity Matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining me here on hmTV. I'm your host, Bernie Furshpan of Raised by Survivors here at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. I have a very special guest with me today to discuss her upbringing by two Holocaust survivors here on Long Island, as well as her insights and her wisdom that she learned lessons from both her parents and how it impacted her life. Thank you so much for joining me, Irene Dunkel Rivera. Thank you so much for carving out the time today.
Thank you.
You must have a busy life. Are you retired?
I am retired.
You're a retired teacher, educator, assistant principal, professor. You've done a lot of things.
I have, yes.
And you find that your retirement age, that you're doing a lot more than when you were employed.
Actually, yes.
Right. That's what I hear from everybody who's retired, including myself. I think I work doubly as hard, and I don't have that much time left. I do have some time. I'm not totally inundated, but I know how to manage my time. But I find that most retired people are very busy, especially with grandkids. Do you have grandchildren?
I do. I have 4 grandchildren.
There you go.
So that has kept me busy over the years. By now, my youngest one is already in preschool, and my oldest one is already in high school, and 16. Yes. So most of my child care raising events are over right now, and I am. That's one of the reasons why I'm here, because as you get older, you think more about the past. You think more about what you're going to leave behind. And now that my parents are both gone, my mother recently, my father quite a number of years ago, it becomes important to think about what you're leaving behind and what they left behind.
It's so true. I feel like we have an obligation, not only a moral obligation to educate young people about the Holocaust and to be more tolerant with each other, but also the obligation of passing on our parents' story, because they will just disappear if we don't keep them alive, those stories. And so it impacted your life. How did growing up with 2 survivors impact your life? In what ways?
Well, I would say one of the issues was that I began to understand much more about how important it is to have a voice in what happens to you and to be aware of what's going on beyond your own home and your own life, and the importance of social justice in this world. My parents were part of the Jewish Labor Bund, which was the Jewish Socialist Party in Poland at the time. And so I did grow up always talking about human rights, because both my parents were Holocaust survivors. They talked very much about the importance of racial equality. My mother was very involved with was very interested in the civil rights movement going on in the early life, because, again, everything comes down to how we take care of each other.
It's so true. Many survivors had 2 choices, basically: to be bitter about their experiences, and the other half, I think, actually have done some incredible things. They became very successful business people. They were kind and generous to others, and they were activists because they knew how bad it can get. Yes. And I think they learned from the lessons, and they want to maintain these lessons. And unfortunately, history keeps repeating itself because nobody does their homework and studies history the way you should.
Absolutely.
And instead, they're counting on social media and other sources for history lessons that have been twisted, what they call twistery, and they're misled with information that is not true and accurate. So how much do you think education is actually mitigating hate and anti-Semitism today?
I think much less so than it used to be. I think it's much less than when I was growing up. I think that social media has played a very big part in making people very skeptical about what they're seeing and what they're knowing. I think that the young people are spending a tremendous amount of time on devices and not actually socializing in the ways that they really should be, and doubting what it is. That's why it's so important, and that's why I'm here today, because I think that there has to be one-to-one dialogue. There has to be people, and I know there aren't that many survivors alive anymore, but the survivors that can still speak to young people are so important, because they need to know that these people really exist. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I feel that it's important for me to be speaking so that young people know that it really happens.
You were a teacher, you were an assistant principal,
Yes.
a professor at LIU as well, right?
Yes.
And so what do you find different about today's students than those back when you were teaching? Or did you actually see a transformation over time?
I think here in New York City, there hasn't been that much more of a transformation as there have been in other parts of the country. I think that New York and this area of the Northeast has kept education alive, and I wouldn't say liberal, but I would say certainly education has been. They've been honest about what, particularly in the area of history and global studies, but I'm not sure if that's true all over the country.
So let's backpedal a little bit and talk about the past. Do you remember the first time you found out that both your parents were survivors of the Holocaust, and did you know what the Holocaust was then, or did you learn it from your parents at first?
I think when I was growing up and I was young, they didn't talk about it very much. I knew that they were immigrants because of their accents and because they spoke Polish at home and Yiddish to their friends. And there were many people coming around who spoke Yiddish, and there was talk that I didn't understand at first, but I did learn later. In the beginning, they didn't want to speak about it. I think they had too many bad memories to speak about it. But as I got older, I also became involved with a community of other Holocaust survivors' children, and I did go to the Workmen's Circle schools, so I did learn Yiddish, and I did begin to learn about the Holocaust from my teachers and from other community members other than my parents. And so, yes, I think that by the time I was a teenager, I didn't know very much about it. I didn't know my parents' particular experiences until much later.
And what was life like growing up at home? Was the food used to comfort you? How did they treat you in terms of going outside of the house? Did they were they suspicious? Were they mistrusting? Did they feel confident that you were outside of the house? And at what age did you feel liberated to some degree that finally they let you go out for a longer period of time? When I call it my liberation, because my parents were very overprotective. And then I realized, okay, they trust me. They feel safe in this environment. Do you remember when that happened?
Well, I don't think I had the same experience as you, fortunately.
Did you grow up in Long Island or in the city?
No, I actually grew up in the Bronx.
In the Bronx.
And my parents moved to a community where a lot of other Holocaust survivors also went to live in. It was called the Amalgamated Housing, which was... it was originated by the garment centers industry in the 30s. And so a lot of Holocaust survivors had gone there to live, and my parents, wanting to be with their fellow friends, moved there. I lived originally in the Southeast Bronx, but my parents put in this application and waited for years to get in. So I did not feel the same as you. My parents were part of that community. There were many other survivors, and we went to the local schools. But we had shared experiences, and we had Passover seders, since most of those Holocaust survivors had lost most of their families. Right. So we had Passover seder all together, kind of communally, which was very nice. And I don't remember feeling that way. Actually, the way I felt later, as I got older, was that when I began hearing the actual stories of my parents and the other survivors, is that I began to feel that I was almost in a shtetl. Okay, and shtetl is a small town in Poland, and I began to feel that we were very closed in, and that I kind of needed to get out.
Right. Well, they were kind of protecting each other in a way, weren't they?
Yes.
Okay, so that's similar. That's similar. Actually.
Similar in a different way.
Right.
You grew up in Long Island.
Actually, in Brooklyn.
Oh, in Brooklyn. Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about your parents' experiences, just to touch the surface. Basically, where they're from, what they went through. Did they lose their entire families? Were they able to escape? What's their story?
So my father was born in Łódź, Poland. He was 18 when the war broke out. His parents were tailors. They were very poor. They lived in a one room. Imagine he had two younger brothers, only 2 years younger than him. So they lived all in one room with two sewing machines in the middle of the room for both parents to work on, and three sons living in them with a bathroom down the hall that was shared by the rest of the occupants of that floor. I think life was difficult for them in Łódź. When the war broke out, I understand that they initially ran away, left the city, but there was nowhere really to go. And when the Łódź Ghetto was put together, they ended up being forced back into the ghetto. They were in the Łódź Ghetto until almost the end, when it was liquidated in 1944, which is something that probably saved my father and his brothers' lives, because by the time that they were sent to Auschwitz, it was so late in the war that he and his brothers never even got the tattoo on their arms, because everything was already pretty much in disarray, and they were moving most of the prisoners already from Auschwitz to other labor camps, and trying to kind of hide them, because the occupied forces were already looking for all the camps and for all the prisoners.
By the way, my mother came from a tiny shtetl. Now, Łódź was considerably a bigger city.
Yes.
she came from a tiny shtetl called Kutno, which is just north of Łódź.
Okay.
And so my grandmother picked up her 4 kids and put them on a train to get to Russia, 1,400-mile journey. And we have a large photograph in our exhibit hall. I don't know if you saw it, of Łódź Ghetto.
I will have to go and look
And there's a
at it
bridge
again.
showing the Jews are crossing the street over a bridge and never mingling with the people on the streets in Łódź. They kept them segregated. And I'm sure when you've spoken to students, or at least you know, that they were taught that the Jim Crow laws of the Deep South here in the United States were plagiarized by Hitler, and he used that same, idea to
Absolutely.
segregate the Jews.
Yes.
And now so your mother's story?
My mother's story is very different. My mother is 10 years younger, was 10 years younger than my father, so she was only 8 when the war broke out. She lived in Warsaw. She came from a very assimilated Jewish middle-class family. My grandfather was an economist. He had actually gone to university, high school and university in Warsaw. He was a correspondent for the Farvetz newspaper at that time, and he was a member of the Jewish Labor Bund. I believe he was secretary. I would have to look that up to remember. So he was very politically active, and they were very I would say middle class, but they were very assimilated. They spoke Yiddish to themselves, the parents, and Polish to the children, my mother and her twin sister. And my grandmother was a principal of a Yiddish secular school and a member of the Zionist political party. So there must have been a lot of debates going on there, and both of them were very politically active. They were on vacation, they tell me, when the war broke out, and they had to cut their vacation short and come back to the city at that time, and that was September of 1939.
Were they inside of the Warsaw Ghetto when they built it?
My mother's grandfather on her maternal side were inside. He had a silver factory that was in there already, and so when they were all forced into the ghetto, they ended up going into the ghetto and living with my mother's family there. Both my grandparents initially left Warsaw and left the 2 girls with their parents, not understanding that this war was going to be a genocide, that Hitler was going to try to do his final solution. They thought it was that he would be arresting political activists and Jewish dissidents. And so they initially left Warsaw together, along with many other Jewish people in that category, so to speak, and with a lot of members, very prominent members of the Jewish Labor Bund. But upon leaving and traveling, they began to meet and understand that this was going to be a genocide, and that the children and that their parents were not safe. And so they decided to return. And they left the group, many of whom ended up getting to this country, but they returned. And on the way back, my grandfather was stopped and arrested by the Russian authorities and ended up in Siberia. But my grandmother returned. My mother's mother. My grandmother returned, and she did go back and get herself back into the ghetto so she could help her parents and be with her daughter.
Wow, so she went back into the ghetto.
Yes.
And risked her own life as well.
Well, she actually died. She was there during the resistance.
Right.
And she
was part of the
but she did not die there. Yes, she was captured, and she did die in Majdanek.
I see.
Afterwards, in a concentration camp. My mother and her sister were smuggled out about 5 weeks before the resistance by the Jewish Labor Bund. Their courier was Vladka Mead, a very famous woman who wrote a book on both sides of the wall, which both my mother and my aunt she wrote about them in it because they lived in the safe house that was used by the resistance fighters.
Right. Are you familiar with Sendler?
Yes,
She was a nurse, right?
Yes.
A Nazi Party member.
Yes.
But snuck out babies.
Yes. Very famous story.
Very famous story. I don't know the entire story.
Amazing.
So do you know the story in terms of how did she sneak out the children?
I don't remember.
She put them in some sort of a bag or something.
Yes, she did.
And she was able to sneak them out. God bless those that.
But the couriers of the Jewish Labor Bund that I do know about, they did manage to try to sneak out all the children. My mother and her sister went over a wall. They bribed. They weren't only German soldiers at the wall. There were Ukrainian soldiers who were at the wall, guarding the wall, and so they were easy. Some of them were easy to bribe with money at the time, and the two of them were kind of thrown over that fence.
Oh, what a miraculous story.
At that time. Many of them also went out through the sewers. Their cousins, Paul and George, who also survived. And were
I find that to be
young.
very innovative, very creative to find ways to escape, because it was a killing machine that you couldn't escape, really. You just couldn't escape it. But somehow people found a way. When it comes to survival and instinct, people find a way to survive. Like my father. I don't know how he did it, but they just manage. We don't know what it's like.
No.
We have no clue.
No.
What are your hopes?
We have the trauma. That's the interesting thing.
Right. It passed on to us for sure.
Yes. The intergeneralization.
Right. Intergenerational trauma.
is definitely
a
real thing.
It is.
And even as you speak about it, I feel it.
A little anxious. I feel a little anxious about what's going on. I mean, we don't spew out, our community and our nation doesn't spew vitriol and hate, against other people. Just the way we're seeing it today, the rise of anti-Semitism is as fierce as it could possibly be. And if my parents were alive today, to them it would be an echo of the 1930s. They would say, wow, we're reliving that experience. And so what do we say to young people today about anti-Semitism? How do we educate them better? How do we stop this? It's hard to stop social media, which is a platform of free speech. And unfortunately, hate speech is part of the free speech. When you incite violence, it crosses a line. But still, hate, words of hate, leads to violence. You don't have to directly incite violence, but it does lead to violence. When there's enough hate and a mob-like mentality, people can hurt other people. And so what do we say to young people today?
Well, I think the key is education. I think that the more people know and the more that they're educated, the more things change. I know that here at this center, you have groups coming in.
Right.
I have sat through some of the groups here, and I know that these young people, not all of them, but even if you have one or two or three who are touched by listening to a survivor, and who all of a sudden understand that this is real, and then they carry it back to their parents, to their friends, to their family, it begins to make a difference. And it has to work in very small ways, and it has to work individually. And it isn't just a matter of anti-Semitism, but it's a matter of understanding that if you can have that kind of intolerance towards one group of people, you can have it towards another. What is going on right now, let's say with the migrant workers and the immigrants that have come here, has similar tones to it. It may not be on the same level. I'm not comparing one to the other, but these kinds of racism, whether it's towards Jews or whether it's towards blacks or whether it's towards brown people, it's all really the same thing.
Hate does not discriminate. It's like cancer. It attacks every organ, right? And every culture, every person. Who's next is the question, right? So Irene Dunkel Rivera, thank you so much for your wisdom and insight. You have many years of experience in the education system in New York City. You've seen a lot, and I'm with you on that in terms of education is the way to mitigate. Absolutely. There are two schools of thought. There's another school of thought that says education is not working. Look what's happening. I think without it, it would be worse. There's no question about it. You definitely want to keep pushing back, because if we don't, we're going to lose and they're going to win. And hate and evil is going to win. So you can never be silent. I think the most important lesson of the Holocaust is not to be silent. So education is the key. We have to be vigilant and keep educating and keep talking and keeping a dialogue with people so that we become more empathetic to each other and understand each other as human beings, that we're all related, and we can do a lot better. And I hope that this next generation wakes up, because I think we're all zombies at this point, and I hope that they wake up and realize and smell the coffee and realize what's happening, that history is repeating itself again, and to push it back and to move in a direction for a better society for their generation. So thank you so much, Irene, for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
And I would like to thank my listening audience today for joining me here on Raised by Survivors on hmTV. Until next time.